For lesson 4, we want to start off by talking about percentages and percents. Percentage is a method of writing decimals as whole numbers. The percent sign takes the place of the two decimal points. When you add a percent sign, you move the decimal place to the right by 2 places. When you take it off, you move it back to the left. But when you're doing a mathematical operation with a percentage, you first have to change it to a decimal number. For example, 35% becomes 0.035, 50% becomes 0.5, and so on. Once you have written it as a decimal, just work with it as you would any other decimal calculations. When you're writing a decimal number as a number with a percent sign, move the decimal point 2 places to the right and add the percent sign. In other words, 1 becomes 100%. 0.75 becomes 75%. If you want a fraction as a percentage, convert the fraction to its decimal equivalent before writing it with a percent. When you're trying to find a percent, form a ratio of the two numbers and find the decimal equivalent of this fraction. In other words, if I want to convert 1/2 to a percentage, I would take 1 divided by 2, because 1 is the part, 2 is the whole number, and that would end up as 0.5 or 50%. Almost all percentages can be written in this form. Some percent of a number is another number. In other words, the first is the whole, and the other number is a part. The statement can always be rewritten as a mathematical problem. Percentage equals part over whole. If the percent is converted to a decimal, then this type of problem can be set up as a proportion, which then can be solved percent divided by or 1. So part over whole. Our first example, find 12% of 15. 12% equals 0.12. In other words, you remove the percentage sign. Take your 0.12, put it over 1, equals the number we're looking for, divided by 15. Multiply them out just like you would any other fraction, and you end up with 0.18. 6 is 10% of what number? 10% equals 0.1. Put it into fraction format. 0.1 equals 6 times 1. 6 divided by 0.1 is 60. Or you could have just moved the decimal place to the right by 1 place on the 6. 10 is what percent of 40? Again, take your 10, divide it by 40, and end up with 0.25. 0.25 equals 25%. One of the uses of percentages is with discounts. Discounts are percent problems with 2 exceptions. Discounts deal in money, so there will be both decimals in both numbers. Once the percent of a number has been taken, that value usually gets subtracted from the original price. This new price is often called the discount price. In most discount problems, the answer wanted is the new price. This is found by multiplying the old price times the decimal equivalent of the percentage. That gives you the discount. Then you subtract the discount from the old price. This gives you the new lower price. Sometimes customers are given double discounts. They may be preferred customers or cash-paying customers, or for any other reason the employer or contractor decides to do that. You can find the final price by using the following formula. You first find your first discount price. That's your list price minus list price times first discount. In other words, you're coming up with a new price that's lower. Your final price is now your first discounted price minus first discounted price times second discount. Okay, so you're going down, you're subtracting 2 discounts. An example of this would be this formula, 300 foot of this form. Okay, this customer has a 10% discount as a new long-term customer. You would take each line item and take a 10% discount and then add it up the total. Ratios are 2 ways of comparing numbers. Written as a mathematical expression, the ratio is written as 2 numbers separated by a colon. And as a statement, a ratio is expressed as a ratio of one number to a second number. as a fraction, the first number of the ratio is the numerator, and the second number is the denominator. If the numbers being compared have fractions in them, an equivalent ratio is formed that only has whole numbers in it. A ratio can usually be set up as a fraction. The ratio is stated as a value of A to a value B. The quantity of the word after the word to always becomes the denominator of the fraction. There are special situations where the relationship between the two numbers is known as an inverse ratio. The inverse ratio can be found by making the ratio and then dividing the number 1 by this ratio to form the ratio, and then find the inverse ratio by interchanging the numerator and the denominator. In other words, you're going to flip the fraction. There's two applications where ratios are often used. First is when two pulleys with different diameters are connected by a belt. The revolutions per minute, or RPM, for each pulley are different. The ratio of the revolutions per minute is the inverse of the ratio of the pulley diameters. The second application involves compression ratio. The compression ratio of a compressor is given as the pressure of the refrigerant at the discharge from the cylinder divided by the pressure of the refrigerant at the inlet to the cylinder. Pressure is measured in pounds per square inch absolute. We'll talk more about that in the refrigeration and air conditioning classes. But for now, we want you to understand the ratio is a comparison of two numbers. The ratio is expressed as a decimal fraction. Again, as we talked about, fan pulleys and motor pulleys, you find a ratio. Compressor pulleys and motor pulleys, again, you find a ratio. Once we have ratios underway, we can look at proportions. Proportions are two ratios that are set to equal each other. Okay, for example, the ratio of A to B equals C to D, or A over B equals C over D. This can be solved by cross-multiplying A times D equals B times C. To find the unknown quantity, divide the two numbers being multiplied together by the number that is being multiplied with the value you don't know. So if A is the quantity that's not known, it can be found using A equals B times C divided by D. Take a look at the formula above that. You'll notice, because we're multiplying A times D, we have to divide B times C by D. What you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other. One example, 4/10 equals y over 75. We want to find out what y is. So we must take cross multiply 4 times 75, 10 times y. Then I now have a linear formula. I have to get the 10 off the left side and get it on the right side. Anytime you have a number multiplied, you can get rid of it by dividing. You must divide both sides of the equation by the same number. So we have a 10 times y. I have to divide the left side by 10 and the right side by 10. We finally get y equals 4 times 75 divided by 10. I do the multiplication first, 300, then divide that by 10, and I get 30. So y is 30. Triangles of similar triangles are in proportion. Side A equals side B. Side A equals side C. Side B equals side C. Okay, again, when dealing with a pulley connected by a belt, the proportion of the pulley speed to pulley diameters is inverse proportions. So I have diameter 1 over diameter 2 equals speed of pulley 2 over speed of pulley 1. You notice that they're inverse. The right side is flipped.